He handed me the receipt, but his eyes said something else entirely. My mornings had rhythm. Predictable, soft, and silent. I woke before the sun, not because I had to, but because it was the only hour that still felt like mine. I'd boil the kettle, stare out at the dew-covered lawn, and wait for the beep of the coffee machine like it might say something new today. My husband still slept through it all. He always did. 30 years of marriage. 2 kids now grown. A nice house in a cul-de-sac where all the hedges were trimmed to the same polite height. A life built correctly. And yet, I couldn't remember the last time I laughed. We weren't fighting. We weren't anything. He'd come downstairs, nod at me, pour his coffee, and check his phone like he was scanning headlines more important than my voice. We'd speak in practicalities, grocery lists, lawn services, dentist appointments. I used to write poetry when the kids were young. Now I made lists. Grocery ones, to-do ones, reasons not to leave ones. He still kissed me goodbye, like he was checking a box. That day, I had an early appointment downtown. My car was in the shop again. He offered to drive me, but I said no. I didn't want his silence sitting beside me in the passenger seat. So I ordered a car instead. A new driver was assigned. He pulled up in a charcoal sedan. Not brand new, but clean. Efficient. He stepped out before I could open the door myself. He wasn't young. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Close-shaved beard, sleeves rolled just once above his forearms. Nothing flashy. Just present. "Good morning, Mrs. Brennan," he said, like he wasn't reading it from the app, but actually meant it. His voice was quiet. Not mumbly, not loud. Just exact. I noticed it right away. The ride started in silence, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. I glanced sideways once. He drove like someone raised by a careful father, both hands on the wheel, eyes steady, shoulders relaxed but alert. Then, just before we hit the freeway, he said it. "You're always up this early?" I blinked. He didn't glance at me when he said it. He just knew, as if I was already a pattern he'd observed. "I like the quiet," I answered. He nodded once. Me too. The drive was 23 minutes. It felt like 5, but also like I'd been somewhere else entirely. He dropped me off at the medical building, and I thanked him, almost too casually. But then he reached into the console, pulled out the receipt for the ride, and handed it to me. As I took it, a slip of something else fluttered from between the papers, an old photograph. It landed on the passenger seat. I picked it up without thinking. It was a picture of a girl, maybe 8 or 9, missing her 2 front teeth, standing barefoot on a dock, laughing into the sun. "She's mine," he said softly. I didn't mean to leave that in there. His voice caught, not quite breaking, just pausing, like he wasn't used to saying the word mine out loud anymore. I handed it back, but something in his eyes stayed with me long after I walked into the lobby. That night, I kept thinking about his face, not because it was striking, but because it didn't seem to want anything from me. Not the way other men look. Not the way my husband doesn't look. Just presence. I started requesting rides again. For things I didn't need rides for. The grocery store. The dry cleaner. Lunch downtown when I had nowhere to be. Every time, the app would ping, "Your driver, Elliot, is on the way." He never flirted. Never asked. Never lingered. But I started noticing things. How he glanced at my hands when I held my purse. How he paused just half a second after I spoke, like he was storing every word. One morning, I wore my hair differently, half-pinned, something I hadn't done in years. He looked at me, briefly. "New look," he said. "It suits the way you sit taller lately." I should have laughed. Or deflected. But I just looked at him. That evening, my husband asked what took me so long at the pharmacy. I lied. I said they had a delay with prescriptions. But the truth was simpler. I had taken the long way home. On purpose. The next morning, Elliot waited in the driveway again. I opened the car door. He didn't move. Instead, he looked straight at me and said, "I can stop driving you if you need me to." I didn't answer, but my fingers lingered on the handle too long. The morning after, I lingered in bed longer than usual, even though I hadn't really slept. My eyes had closed, but my mind hadn't rested. It just kept circling back, retracing every glance, every breath in that car. I could still hear his voice. Not the words, just the shape of it, the calm it carried, or maybe the chaos it left behind. My husband stirred beside me, sighed, and shifted his weight without opening his eyes. He was on his side, back turned, like always. He slept like someone with nothing left to fear, or maybe someone who'd already surrendered. I moved quietly, slipping out from under the covers, padding barefoot to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror and studied my face. There was nothing different. And yet, everything was. Downstairs, I made coffee. Out of habit, I made 2 cups, even though I knew he'd pour his own. We didn't share anymore. Not meals, not stories, not mornings. Just space. He came down eventually, nodded at me, scrolled through his phone. The same routine. The same silence. But it felt heavier now, like we both knew something had shifted, but neither of us wanted to name it. I opened my laptop and stared at a blank document. I didn't know what I meant to write. Maybe an email to myself. Maybe an apology I hadn't earned the right to send. Either way, I never typed a word. I just deleted it and closed the lid. For 3 days, I didn't open the app. I walked when I could, took the bus, made excuses to stay home. I told myself it was nothing, that it hadn't meant anything. But I felt like a room someone had walked through and left the door open. I couldn't close it again. When I finally did open the app, I didn't let myself hope. But when I saw his name again, Elliot, my heart did something strange. Not joy, not fear, just recognition. He pulled up and I almost didn't get in. But I did. This time, I sat in the back. Not because I had to, but because I didn't trust myself not to. He didn't turn around. He just said, gently, "You don't owe me anything." I wanted to say thank you, or explain, or something, but the words didn't come. I just didn't want to assume you'd be back. We drove in silence for a while. The air between us wasn't awkward. It was dense, like fog before a storm. When we reached my stop, I stayed in the seat for a second longer than I needed to. "You ever wonder if you missed your moment?" he said, eyes still forward, "and now it's showing up disguised as something else?" I met his eyes in the mirror. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped out into a world that suddenly felt too loud. That night, my husband made dinner. It was rare. He opened a bottle of wine, even set the table. No candles, but the gesture felt curated, like he was trying. Halfway through eating, he put his fork down. He looked at me across the table. Not through me. At me. "You've been somewhere else lately." I stayed quiet. He exhaled slowly. "You smiled yesterday. In the hallway. That little one. First time in years." That's how I knew. Knew what? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, almost gently, "I saw the receipt. The one you left in your coat pocket. You've been using the same driver. Over and over." I swallowed hard. Nothing happened. He nodded. "I know. And that's what scares me." We didn't finish dinner. He slept in the guest room that night. No fight. No accusations. Just a quiet decision between 2 people who hadn't really looked at each other in years. In the days that followed, I moved through the house like someone visiting a place she used to live. Familiar, but no longer belonging. I avoided the app. I even deleted it once, only to re-download it an hour later, my fingers trembling. But I didn't request a ride. Not right away. One morning, The sun was just starting to rise, and I found myself staring at the car keys on the hook. Then I picked up my phone instead. I didn't call for a ride. I opened my messages. I don't know what any of this is. I just know it woke something up in me. I hovered over the send button, then deleted the message, then rewrote it. I'm sorry if I made things heavier. You were just kind. And I hadn't been seen in a long time. This time, I sent it. He didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next. A week later, I received one line. You deserve to be seen. Not just in passing, but in full. That was it. I didn't respond. Some things are better left in their quiet corners, but I think about him sometimes. When I pass certain streets. When I sip my coffee in silence. Not as a regret, but as a turning point. Not every connection is meant to be followed. Some are just meant to remind you that you're still alive. My husband still wears his ring. So do I. But some mornings, when I catch my reflection, I see a woman I almost forgot how to be and almost remembered too late.